Greetings, everyone. Welcome to our exclusive Global Leading Voices webinar campaign. We are delighted to have you join us here today. Please be informed that if you have any questions during the presentation, you may type them into the question box in your control panel. The presenter will answer your questions at the end of the presentation accordingly. Now, without further ado, we will turn the time over to our presenter, who will begin shortly.
So welcome to the event. I am really happy to be here, and I am going to speak to you about how women are making a difference in cybersecurity. So I just want to say thank you also for coming and listening into this. If you are listening in live, I really appreciate that. We had some, it was my technical issues last week, so this has been rescheduled. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce you to exactly who I am. So some of you may know me, but if you don't, my name is Jane Frankland, and I'm an award-winning entrepreneur, speaker, consultant, and author. I'm a top 50 influencer in the UK market, and recently, actually last week, I was voted as being the third most influential person in the UK right now. I have 19 years experience in information security. I am a former owner of a penetration testing company called Corsaire. I worked as a senior executive for several large PLCs. A board advisor for a forum with 170 senior cybersecurity leaders in it, and I've been heavily involved with industry standards and certifications such as OWASP, CREST and Cyber Essentials. Last year I was also an SC Awards judge for Europe and the USA, and I am a mum to 3 kids, my most important job. So I'm going to start off with really looking at the landscape, because the way that I see it is that we have a very challenging landscape right now. For a start, attacks are getting, they're increasing, they're getting more sophisticated, and we have a situation where by and large the majority of our industry are having to defend against these attackers, and rather than be offensive. So hackers and attackers have to only find one way into our companies, and we are dealing with new technology such as IoT, the cloud, and also we've got legacy systems and non-electronic systems as well. And then with regulations like GDPR, it makes it really interesting. And obviously in cybersecurity, our job is to mitigate risk, so not to protect everything, because we can't do that. It's not possible. We have to do it in line with the business and their appetite for risk. So it's particularly challenging because of those things. So again, the way that I see it is we have a situation a little bit like where we're looking for our attackers and the adversaries, and we don't know who they are or where they are. So what exactly do our adversaries look like? It's a little bit like Where's Wally or Where's Waldo if you're listening in from the US. We also don't know what our cybersecurity professionals look like either, and that's a huge worry with the attacks that are increasing, because if these attacks are increasing and we don't have the staff to protect our environments, we're in trouble. So the gap actually, according to Frost & Sullivan, between available cybersecurity professionals and unfilled positions is set to widen by 1.8 million by 2022. So it's not good at all, hugely worrying. Now for me, when I look at this, I do think, are women the answer? And again, I think that they're not the only answer. I think they're part of the solution. And obviously this webinar today is all about that. And the reason that I think that women are the solution is largely on account of economics. So in accordance with, well, according to McKinsey & Co., they reported that actually full gender equality would add 26% or $28 trillion to global GDP if we were to achieve equality by 2025. Now, unfortunately, that's not going to happen. But if we do get women into business, into more leadership positions particularly, then we know from research that there is more productivity, there's more innovation, we stay on schedule, on budget, much more compared to homogeneous teams. And certainly when women are politically and economically empowered, countries are more stable. And right now, with the way that things are in the world, we could really do with that. Now, looking at it from a security perspective, there's one other thing that is really, really important and makes us very different from every other industry. It's to do with performance, and it's to do with the way that we see risk and the way that we think. Now, women are different to men, and it is okay to be different. And sometimes some people believe that because women see risk in a different way to men, there's been an awful lot of studies with regards to that. That's because of the way that we are wired, the way that we are programmed to give birth to children. And whether or not you believe that or not, we do see risk in a different way. Now, the next slide that I'm going to show you actually shows you that. It's from the WE forum, and if you go and have a look at the link, which is detailed here, you're going to see it better than actually I can show you here. But this is looking at risk in terms of how women see it, and here's looking at it in terms of how men see it. So it's slightly different. Now, looking at the way that we are wired and the male and female brains is really, really interesting. And although there are more similarities, there are definitely differences. And those differences really matter, when we're talking about risk and when we're talking about our industry. So we know from all the studies that have gone on that men's brains are bigger and heavier relative to their body size. Men and women have different methods of processing information too. And when we look at women, women have most brain cell matter in the frontal cortex, which is all to do with reasoning, and the limbic cortex, which is all to do with the emotions. Women also use both sides of the brain, and they have 30% more neurons firing than men. This doesn't make women better than men, it just makes women different to men. Women are also strong in empathy, intuition, collaboration, self-control, and also worry. And worry is kind of associated with risk. Men respond to challenging and threatening situations with action, and women tend to internalize it. And then we have these things called hormones that are raging through our bodies. And whilst I'm simplifying with regards to all of this, because the brain is incredibly complex and neuroscience is still developing, and there's a lot of research that is still to be done and is still coming out, this is by and large a very simplified account of what we have. Now, looking at the hormone side of things, we have testosterone, and testosterone is associated with winning and power. Estrogen is associated with connection and bonding, and then we have serotonin. And serotonin is also a hormone, and women have 52% less serotonin than men. And serotonin is a critical hormone that really helps to keep anxiety under control. And it's highly complex, and it really does depend on, serotonin is actually crucial with regards to the way that we see risk, our anxiety levels, and also depression as well. I'm not going to go into it here, but it is really interesting looking at it. Now, there was a company called Culture that recently put out a report, and they went out and surveyed 10,000 employees across 2 Nordic countries. And what they found was that there are differences with regards to gender in terms of cybersecurity. And what they found was that men actually rated their knowledge of IT controls, awareness, and behavior more than women. It doesn't surprise me. And they also reported men were less compliant, they had more risky behaviors, and there was more risk amongst male employees. Now, when they looked at women, what they found was that women actually rated their knowledge of IT controls and awareness much less than men. And these two aspects are definitely in line with other reports that have been done outside of our industry. What we actually know is that there isn't a difference. Men and women are pretty much the same, but it's their perception of how they are. So they also found that women reported less risky behaviors and were more compliant, embracing of IT and organization controls and technologies much more than men. So what does this mean? Well, certainly with regards to looking at our situation now, we have a majority of men in the industry. Right now we have about 90% of the industry is male. And what that means is that with more men we have more risk and more innovation, and with more women, if we were to go the other way, we would have less risk and less innovation. Now obviously the answer is to balance it out, and we don't need equal numbers, but much more balance would be much more healthy in terms of the way that we see risk. It also enables us with this different thinking, and women are only part of that, to stop being blindsided, because we know that certainly in terms of those who are stealing data from us and attacking us are not constricted by anything. You know, they just have to they just have to meet their objective, which is either to steal or destroy, and so forth. Now, certainly when other countries are looking at this, I've got the American flag here. I have heard a lot of the Americans, the North Americans, talk about this issue in terms of the gender balance being really presenting a great threat to their nation's security. So they take it very, very seriously, because they know the difference that women can make when they come into the industry. Churchill knew this. Now, Churchill was one of the greatest leaders of all times, and he knew this. And when we had a situation when we were fighting during the Second World War, what he found was he needed to change the way that we were operating. So we had a stalemate situation whereby the Allies were not winning against the Germans. And what he did was he brought together many, many different types of people together at Bletchley Park. So we had about 10,000 women, and they came from universities, and some were school leavers. You know, they were also linguists, they were mathematicians, they were translators, chess champions, and they also joined forces with men as well, but again from diverse environments. So we had men like Ian Fleming, who was the author of the James Bond books, and we had men like Alan Turing, who was autistic and gay, and their efforts actually reduced the war by 2 to 3 years. So it enabled us to outsmart, you know, that those who we were at war with, and he called that corkscrew thinking. So the downsides to all of this is that, you know, increasing diversity, you know, say if we're talking gender or diversity in general, is hard. It doesn't feel right. So being around people who are different to us definitely causes us discomfort, rougher interactions, a lack of trust, greater perceived interpersonal conflict, lower communication, less cohesion, more concern about disrespect, and lots of other problems. But certainly when we do come together, then the upsides are that we're more creative, more diligent, and harder working. And the reason why is because simply by interacting with people who are different to us causes us to prepare better. We don't presume anything, and we come to the table anticipating that it's going to be harder, and that it's going to be hard to get our viewpoints across, and that reaching consensus is going to take effort. And because of that, it really does enable us to search for new information, for novel informations, and to really increase our creative thinking and solve problems better together. So over the years, what has happened with regards to all of this, and certainly in terms of security, is that the numbers of women have dropped considerably. And you know, when I started looking at this in 2015, I was completely unaware of the situation. And what I saw was actually low numbers, but a decreasing trend. So what we had was, we had a drop from 19% in 2008 to 10% in 2005. And that shocked me so much that I actually set to work, and I started writing about it. And I had no intention of writing a book, which is what I've done subsequently. But you know, I just started putting my viewpoint across, because I've been in the industry for 19 years, and I've done something that certainly most people, let alone women, haven't done. They've created a 7-figure, multi-million-dollar penetration testing company in cybersecurity. So right now, looking at the situation, we have this situation. We have in North America 14% of women in the industry, in Europe 7%, in the Middle East 5%, Latin America 8%, Africa 9%, and Asia Pac 10%. So it's very stagnant in terms of those figures. Nothing is improving. And this book here is what it's all about. So it's really looking at the situation and what we can do to address it. And certainly with the book, what I've done is I've broken the problem down into 3 areas. So I've looked at really the assumptions. So what are we assuming now about where we are? And I've got 7 categories there. So I've got, topics like women cost more than men, HR is holding us back. These things are being said in the industry, and looking at them. STEM is holding us back. Looking at qualifications don't make a hacker, educate the educators. And then I'm looking at 3 challenges, the 3 challenges which I'm going to come on to in a minute, which are really all around these things: attracting, identifying and retaining women in the industry. And the reason that I've really separated them out like that is because some companies actually do a really good job right now of attracting women into the industry, and identifying them. And when I talk about identification, I'm really talking about the hiring processes, but they may have more challenges around retention. And then other companies really have a situation where they struggle with attracting, identifying and retaining. So it's important that these really are looked at separately. Now, looking at the attraction piece, really there are several things going on here. And when I talk about this, most of the time people will say to me, Jane, we've got to get into the schools earlier. We've got to, get the young girls interested in what we do. And I really agree with them, but I know it's not the only thing that we need to do. Certainly when Raytheon and the National Cybersecurity Alliance went out and surveyed the career interests of Gen Ys or millennials in 12 countries fairly recently, what they found was that 62% of men and 75% of women said no secondary or high school classes offered the skills to help them pursue a career in cybersecurity. Now, for me, that doesn't surprise me at all. And, certainly when I'm looking at our industry, it is evolving and it's still relatively new. It's a young industry. Now, obviously, what we can do is do a better. I know that in many countries around the world, there are some great initiatives, going on, and some people working really, really hard to change this situation. But our industry is very diverse, and it has evolved from having been in it for 19 years. I have seen it evolve from being something that was very technical, IT security as we used to call it then, and it's still called IT security, but we definitely referred to it as IT security or information security, and now it's moved to really cybersecurity, and there's much more kind of involvement in terms of the human side, the behavior side, and how we can influence and change behavior so that we're not at risk from being attacked, and the cyber criminals and attackers who are out there. So it's very, very diverse now, and there's much more of an emphasis on that human side and the education bit. Looking at the education side of things, again, in terms of computer science, what I hear from many CISOs out there in the industry is that the universities are not really serving the graduates in the best way that they can. In the UK, we have a particular problem with that, and what was discovered recently was that out of all the degree subjects that were studied, computer science in the UK had the most unemployment out of all of the degree subjects. Now, a report was done, an investigation, and there is about a 90-page report called the Shadbolt Review that really looked into why exactly this is happening, particularly because we've got a so-called skills shortage going on in the industry. So we have a little bit of an issue there, certainly in the UK, with regards to preparing our students for a career in technology and cybersecurity, and we can certainly do a better job with regards to that. And then also we have a situation whereby we have people who are interested in coming into our industry, and they may be women, they may be women over 24 years old, which is usually the cutoff, for apprenticeships, and they want to transition into our industry. And many of them have come from careers like accounting or auditing or law, some teaching, some in technology, and then some from other areas as well. I've had many conversations with women from all over the world that have come from really diverse professions. I was having a conversation with someone the other day, and she was a hairdresser. And I love that, because it's just brilliant that we can attract people from these diverse professions into our industry. The challenge that we have is really about how we are really going to market and the image and perception of what it is that we do when we're attracting these people into our industry. And particularly when it comes to women and girls, there's often a perception that we are really technical and you have to be really a super brain in order to come into cybersecurity. Obviously, those of us who are in it know that that's not exactly the case, and how diverse an industry, a profession that it is. But so we really need to do a better job of that. And in terms of that, one of the best pieces of advice that I'm giving right now is to really look at the market and who it is that we are wanting to attract. And certainly we have 3 different needs to satisfy. When I speak to the CISOs, most of the time their teams are small and they're outsourcing an awful lot to consultancies. So for them, what the types of people that they need are those who have good project management skills, good communication skills, they can think strategically. And then when I look at suppliers and vendors and consultancies, they need to satisfy their CISOs, so they need people who are billable from day one and usually highly certified, because the CISOs are looking for that assurance. And then of course there are the candidates, the employees. What are they looking for, and satisfying them, with regards to the other 2, the CISOs and suppliers. Role models as well. We lack role models. Typically women are just out there getting on with the job, and they're busy, and in terms of role models, there are very few of them. I know that I'm encouraging more to come forward and to be visible out there and act as a role model. And I've seen an increase, in regards to that really recently. So I can think of some brilliant role models that are out there. And certainly the awards that are going on, whether they're in technology or whether they're in cybersecurity, are really helping and showing that there are women in the industry. Because it's not just about showing what it is that we do. It's showing the types of people who work in it. We're not all the same. We don't look the same. We are really, really diverse, and quite frankly, our industry is really tolerant. So we need to really show the benefits of what you can gain by coming into it, and the types of people who are into it, who are in it. We also need to look at identifying. So this is all about the hiring aspect. And certainly when women are looking at a career in our industry, if they are considering it, what they're looking for are for organizations that really show that they are taking this seriously. And so recently I met someone who's gone to work for a bank in the UK, and she had a background in law, and she didn't consider cybersecurity at all as a career. And she was approached by a recruitment consultant who said, I think this would be a really good career for you. Will you have a look at it? And she did, but she told me that one of the first things that she did was she looked at the bank to see if there were people like her, there in leadership positions, because that was certainly going to influence her decision to have an interview at that company. So certainly women are looking at gender diversity and the initiatives that companies have in place before approaching them for a job, for an interview. And then in terms of the whole interview process, the stakeholders, there are many things that are going on here that I've discovered through doing my research for the book that many are unaware of. So often I get asked about, well, do women want to work in this industry, or we don't have women in the industry, or we're not seeing the CVs. Sometimes, when I hear those types of questions or statements that are being said, I often ask them, well, what is your process? Have you looked at the process? Are you checking with your HR team or your recruitment consultants that you're using agency-wise to find out how they're doing it? Because certainly one thing that I found out is that often HR professionals are just doing keyword searches, and they're doing keyword searches for cybersecurity. So they're missing anyone who's got information security on their CV. Now, it's absolutely basic that this is going on, and it's going on with on with multiple HR professionals, and also to a certain extent with some recruitment agencies as well. So it's really important to look at that process, and it's also important to look at you as a hiring manager, your process, and whether actually you've had training in this, because invariably, again, what I've been finding out is that hiring managers haven't been taught how to hire. They don't know how to do it. And often what I hear a lot of is actually we need to get women into our company because we accept that there are all these benefits and we want to increase the balance, but they also need to fit in culturally. And for me, whenever I hear that phrase cultural fit, it always makes me think of bias. So that unconscious bias that is going on, which is, you know, my next slide here, and recruiting in their own image. So certainly looking at unconscious bias and stereotypes, you know, we all have unconscious bias that is going on. When I discovered that I had unconscious bias, I was, again, deeply shocked. It made me feel very uncomfortable, but I recognized that I have it, and I can check myself if I hear it or you know, see it manifesting itself. But typically, and there's a link here that you can access and go and test your own unconscious bias, which is really useful, and certainly I did that and found it, you know, really useful. But in terms of it, it's useful to know, because one of the ways that I see this really presenting itself is in the language that is used. So typically, whether we are trying to attract through campaigns or whether we're trying to hire, and it's the language that we're using in job specs, you know, what I hear and see is language that is biased, and typically it's biased towards male candidates. So typical words that are very male are words like competitive, ambitious, leading, decisive. You know, when we're in security, I hear a lot about warfare, and there is an aspect of warfare in our industry, definitely. But if you're in a B2B environment, are we actually at war? I question that. I'm not saying that we're not, but if you believe that we are at war in a B2B environment, then that's absolutely the right word to use. But when you do use that, do so knowingly that you are going to probably put off a lot of women from applying. You know, other words like warrior, ninja, battlefield. You know, I heard the other day that we needed to be networking much more with one another, and I definitely agree with that. But the way that we were told to do that was actually through beer-to-beer networks. Now, as a woman sitting in the audience, you know, I didn't feel particularly included with regards to that, and I do like a beer, but you know, that was something that I noticed. You know, when we look at women really like to see things put in context. So why does it matter? And in terms of the specific languages that you can use words like complementary, supportive, you know, relationship, collaborative, and so forth. And for me, when I came into this industry, I came into it because of James Bond. You know, so it was, you know, in the late 1990s, when I started a technology company, there were only two aspects that were really interesting to me, and one of them was AI and the other was security. And it's brilliant now because the two are merging. But I thought that security was really cool. It was dynamic, it was exciting, and Bond is amazing. I love Bond, you know, his fast cars and cool cars and fashion and amazing locations and things like that. So that was why I got into it. And obviously certainly what I do is nothing like James Bond at all, but it was what attracted to me, and that's how I got into it. But it's not why I stay in it. You know, I stay in it because I believe in it, freedom and empowerment and entrepreneurship. And, you know, certainly in terms of what I have been doing for most of my career in security, I've been protecting businesses. And as an entrepreneur, I know how hard it is to build a business, and I don't want someone taking away all my hard work, my asset, you know, with a hacker or an attack. So that's why I'm in it. But often women, tell me that they are similar with regards to that, and they stay in it because they want to protect individuals. They want to make sure that identity theft isn't going on. So it's really important that we look at, this if we want to attract more women, in terms of the context. And ideally, when we are writing our job specs and we're out there talking, that we're doing so with gender neutral language and being inclusive for both men and women. So this is not an either or situation. So kind of moving on from this, I'm just going to see if my slide will actually move. Okay, yes, it was having a little technical moment there. So the other thing that I see is a reliance in terms of the hiring process on certifications. And I'm a big believer in certifications and personal development, your technical development and also your soft skills development. But according to Burning Glass, I think, Burning Glass did a report fairly recently, and what they found was that actually the jobs that were advertised for cybersecurity, 35% of them asked for at least one qualification in the major certifications. So certifications like CISP and SSCP, and I'm just trying to think of GIAC and so forth. So that's what they were looking for. CISM is another one. So obviously, in terms of recruitment, if you're just ticking them off, for me, that's looking at it from in a lazy manner. Using these to develop and increase your learning and your knowledge is good, but not in terms of just a tick box exercise. The last challenge is all to do with retention, and again, there are different kind of aspects that I've been looking at here, and the main one really is to do with culture. So looking at culture from a generation perspective, a country perspective, and also from an organizational perspective, because when you look at it like that, and you're making sure that you are attracting and retaining professionals in accordance with good flexible working conditions, which we can do in our industry, and inclusive environments, then you're going to keep your not just women, but you're going to keep your staff. And also looking at it very much from a people issue, as opposed to a women only or even a parents issue. This is a people issue, and it's really important that this is looked at as a people issue, as opposed to here's something that we have to just solve for women. When I do look at this, as a woman in the industry, and I feel very blessed that I've suffered very little discrimination in the whole of my 19 years in the industry, but I also kind of question whether that is, one, because I was an entrepreneur, and two, because I just didn't recognize that the discrimination that is going on. I'm not sure, but all I know is that it hasn't felt like I've suffered a lot of discrimination. In fact, I think there's been a huge amount of opportunity for me, and I've loved it, because I think our industry is the best. It's the best out there. It's an incredible industry, and I love the people in it. But certainly with regards to women do have to play a different game, and they have to learn the rules of the game, and they have to play better than anybody else. So women do have to work twice as hard as men, and certainly with regards to certifications, they typically have to be certified. It's what they want to do, and it's what others look for them to have. It's an unspoken rule, but there are many unspoken rules with regards to women being in this industry. Women also need to really work on their brand, their personal brand, and they need to become much more visible and look at doing visible work rather than invisible work. So typically women they're just getting on with the job. They're keeping a low profile and doing a brilliant job and just getting on, but working on the right project really matters, if a woman in cybersecurity really wants to advance. And men definitely are reported to be working on larger, more visible projects than women. And men have greater access to roles that are more likely to be mission critical, over the course of their careers than women. And that can be to do with profit and loss responsibility and management and reporting as well. So there is a difference. And then, if we look at confidence and competence, there's a difference going on there. And I'm absolutely sure that this has to do with the way that women see risk. So we don't come to the table the same. And what I hear a lot of in the industry is I hear a lot of equal, solutions and equality. And that's where we all want to be. Nobody wants to be differentiated because, of their gender or any other reason at all. But the fact of the matter is that we don't come to the table all the same. And the best way that I can explain this in terms of that kind of equality situation is really in terms of looking at it in terms of equity versus equality. And if we had an equality solution to women and men in the industry, if, for example, I give you, I'll paint a picture of 3 people, they're of different height, tall person, middle person, tiny person, and there's a fence. Only the tall person can see over it. And someone comes along and says, okay, I've got an equal solution for you. I'm going to give you all the same height box. Well, everybody stands on it. The tall person who can already see over the fence stands on it and can see further. The middle-sized person can now see over the fence, but the little person can't see over the fence. So that's an equal solution to the problem. An equity solution is looking at the situation and saying, tall person, you can see over the fence, I don't need to give you anything. Middle-sized person, you need a slightly shorter box so you can see over, and little person, you need a slightly taller box so you can see over. Now everyone can see over the fence, but ideally what we want to be doing is removing the fence so that nobody needs any different. Nobody needs to be treated differently. Everyone can see through it, without having to be treated in a different manner. That is equity, and through processes and new technology that is out there, particularly in terms of recruitment, we can actually move towards that, and it will help us. So it's very much a combination of using people, processes, and technologies in order to improve the situation and the balance that we have, with regards to women in cybersecurity in greater numbers. The other thing that we can do is really look at paying it forward and look at mentoring and sponsoring, because these two things really matter when it comes to women in the industry, and they really impact the career advancement of women. And it's mentors level, not gender, that really impacts their career advancement. So typically when women are looking for mentors, typically they don't look for a mentor who is high up in an organization, and that really is the key. They need to look for someone who is, senior in that organization and who can really help to not just develop them in terms of, this is what I've done, because mentoring is all about training. It's about, this is what I've done, I can impart my knowledge to you. It's very different to coaching. And sponsoring is all about getting someone into a job. So for me, I do this for men and women. I mentor and I sponsor, and I'll recommend and connect them to people I know who may be looking for new team members, and I can sponsor them in and connect them to others in the industry. So it's really, really important. And certainly looking at women, the personal branding can be fundamental in terms of attracting a good mentor. That's why it really, really matters. And also high potentials who have been developing a protege, through research that's out there in the market. What they discovered is that, these high potential women received 25K greater compensation. This is in US dollars, greater compensation growth in 2 years than those who didn't operate in this manner. So being developed really, really does matter. And those who are developed and helped pay it forward, they go on to develop and to mentor and to sponsor more people. So it's highly beneficial to whoever's involved. So I'm going to hand over to PECB now, and they're going to talk to you about the IT security training courses that they offer.
Thank you, Jane, for this outstanding and informative presentation. Before we proceed with the Q&A session, I would like to inform all the attendees that PCB provides training and certification services for ISO 27032 Lead Cybersecurity Manager, Lead Pen Testing Professional, ISO 27034 Application Security Lead Implementer and Auditor, ISO 27035 Information Security Incident Management Lead, Computer Forensics Examiner Foundation and Lead Examiner. These training courses will provide you with the comprehensive theoretical instructions and hands-on training in the most innovative and advanced training environments. These training courses also will help you to learn the required skills and knowledge to establish an effective security program. A PCB certificate will demonstrate your dedication in implementing and managing these processes and frameworks, and most importantly, you will be receiving a worldwide recognition. Now we will proceed with the Q&A session. One attendee asks, based on your experience, why women should consider a cybersecurity career?
Well, really, it's to do with it's to do with the advantages. So it's highly paid for a start, and I know that money isn't the reason why anyone should come into it, but it's progressive, it's dynamic, it's future-proofed as much as any industry can be. You know, we've got industries like accounting, and accounting is being taken over by technology, and security is increasing. We're growing. We've got more jobs than ever. You know, it's a buoyant field. So it can provide that stability for a lot of employees and people coming into it. And I think it's interesting. It's particularly interesting right now because certainly looking at the generations, you've got the millennials, the Gen Ys, and you've got the Centennials, the Gen Zs, and they're very similar, but they are very different. But certainly the Centennials are looking for more security, more stability in terms of the careers that they're choosing. And we can offer that to them. And because it's so diverse, you know, when I talk to people out there in the industry, I say, oh, pretty much there's a job for anyone. Our ecosystem is really big. You know, if you want to come in and work technically in the industry, then fine, you can come in and you can work and do security assessments and pen testing, you know, or fraud and forensics, or you can do security architecture or endpoint security or threat intelligence or encryption. But if you're not technically minded and you're much more business orientated, then you can look at governance, risk and compliance, or you can look at strategy or auditing or awareness or program, you know, management or ops. You know, so there really is something for everyone, and because it's growing and there is that security at a time of kind of insecurity in terms of careers, I think and then you've got the pay, you know, you've got the whole salary side of things. We're really well paid in our industry, much more so than a lot of the typical traditional, you know, industries out there like law and medicine and teaching and accounting. So that's really why. And it's fun, it's dynamic, it's really cool. No, we have a lot of fun in the industry, so that's why I would recommend it.
Thank you, Zain.
I hope that's answered your question.
Yeah. Now another rather similar question to the first one. What are the key areas of development in cybersecurity for a woman's career?
Oh, that's really, really broad. So it really depends on what you want to do. So when I have people coming to me asking for mentorship or you know, help in terms of either getting into this industry or navigating through, I really kind of ask them whether or not they want to either be an industry specialist, you know, a subject matter specialist, or whether they really want to move through to becoming, say, CISO into management, because that really kind of affects how you develop. And I know on my website there's a really good PDF. In fact, it's a PDF done by Gary Hazlett, who actually mapped out a kind of career route, and it's very flexible, but it shows all the different areas that you can, move into and in between. And certainly from talking to CISOs out there in the industry, and whether or not we need a roadmap, a formal roadmap, which I do actually believe that we need to if we're going to compete against those traditional kind of professions. We need to be mapping it out with the ability to be flexible and move into other areas so that people can gain that knowledge and become much more useful. But it's interesting too, because technology is moving so fast. And certainly for me, what I recommend is making sure that you are actually exercising your brain as much as possible, because technology is changing so fast. So the ability to be able to pick up skills and learn very fast is going to become much more important as we kind of progress, through the next few years, simply because things are changing really, really fast.
Thank you, Jane. Now, because of the time limitation, we will answer one more question for today's webinar, and the rest of the questions will be answered by Ms. Jane accordingly after the webinar. So the last question is, if through your efforts and those of others, we're able to achieve more gender balance in the cybersecurity field, what does that get us? What could the field accomplish that it can't now? Would we be more secure?
Well, nobody's got a crystal ball. So again, I really like that question. So nobody's got a crystal ball. So until we try it, we don't know. But certainly looking at all the information that we have, I wouldn't be doing all of this work, certainly if I didn't believe, that by increasing the numbers of women in the industry, we'd be able to make a difference. Women can help different types of thinkers, not just women, but all different types of thinkers will really help us to improve our game. And we have a very, very hard game, because it's not just about protecting. We have to do that in accordance with the business and in accordance with regulation and risk. So it's hard to measure simply because of that, but it can be measured. And I definitely believe that women can play a substantial contribution to helping us to improve what we're doing now, because what we do know now is that what we're doing is not working. No matter how much money we throw at it, it isn't working. So we really, I think, going back to that Churchill slide, we need to apply much more corkscrew thinking and open up our industry again, which is what it was like 20 years ago when we opened the doors and said, if you're interested in this, in technology, and then come into it, we'll let you come in and we'll develop you and you'll evolve. Right now, there is a little bit of the door is shut, and you've got to be highly certified if you want to come into it. We need to get better thinkers into our industry and develop them. That is absolutely key. And yeah.
Thank you, Jane. I believe that with these last question we'll conclude the presentation. Once again, I'd like to thank you, Jane, for this great and informative presentation. Also, I would like to thank all the attendees who have joined us today, and we hope you have enjoyed this webinar. In the upcoming days, we will send you the recorded link, as I mentioned before, which will be uploaded on our official YouTube channel and in our website, www.pcb.com. Goodbye, everyone, and I wish you all a pleasant day ahead. Thank you.